Hello everybody and welcome back to another On the Workbench session. We're going to try and do some more combinations of yellow and non-metallic metals, mostly in the form of this right here. We're going to take on actually a couple of figures at the same time, and this is the same with the Baratheons that we've done before, again with some of the faded ultramarine, some of our faded plum that's going to get in there. Going to be using, of course, our blue liner, maggot white, obviously some of the clear yellow over here too. I think we're going to also have the sepia liner show up, and maybe some other stuff here too. Never hurts to have things like the dark gray blue and the burnt sienna around. So some of our pro acryls there. Usual wet palette over here. Usual craft brushes. We're also going to do the spongy thing because we're going to hit these mostly with the blue liner here and the sepia liner back here. But what I really did want to emphasize was the reflected yellow on a lot of the armor. See that? To me, any chance I get to show that off, I really want to try and do that because I think it really is helpful. Now, like here, actually, I put some here. I didn't put some over here. Look at that. So I remembered it here, and I remembered it in some other spots too. I remembered it right there. It's hard to remember that. And I guess, well, now you see why I wanted to sort of re-emphasize this idea of the reflected light, like right here on the helmet, because there's I remembered it everywhere. I even put it there, but I still got to get some over here. So what we will do, and we'll get all of our paints out on the palette here, and you'll mostly see these two guys when we get started. So away we go with our two liner paints, especially the two liner paints. We're going to start off with the blue liner. As always, it's just water. Have our sponge at the ready. Now this is not going to be, maybe as watery as past applications of the blue liner. Actually, I realized that it doesn't really have to be able to wipe it away. Just the more and more that I've done it, and noticed, oh yeah, you know what? Really don't have to water that stuff down. It's thin enough to get down into those crevices almost by itself anyway, even when it's just practically full thickness. It's one of the reasons why I like the liner paints. It's just a touch of water in there. That's all, just enough to make it move. Yeah, let's get the rest of our even the glove. And I have determined that in addition to this, well, I guess it's a variation on scale mail of some type here. Okay, we've got it now. I'll take up this sponge here and just, I don't know, I think I've been kind of automatically now cutting it into pieces. And yes, I'm going to be smashing into that palette camera because I was filming stuff that was bigger, like some terrain pieces, and it's in a whole different place now. So I do apologize for that. That's going to happen more than once here. And there we go. And this doesn't really matter if it gets on the cloak parts or not. Who cares? We'll get down to our rest of the armor here. Now I had just taken the blue liner and essentially painted all the stuff on the base there because it's the same marble stuff that we had to do on all of the previous units. Like I believe it was it series 12 was the Baratheon Wardens? This is series something. It was one of the army painting series. And the bases here are kind of the same, except that ranking these guys up was beyond painful. I mean, actually beyond painful. So that's why the marble just had to kind of go around their feet. I had no other choice but to do that. If I had sawed those things off, there was no way I was ever going to get them. And by ranked up, it's not enough to just place them. they have to be turned at such precise angles to be, if it's turned a half a degree too far in one direction or another, it's these double hammers. Well, bad enough double hammers, and then the cloaks do the same thing. So it's kind of doomsday all over with these guys. Now I know what I'm starting to see here, and this might be something that I actually try with future Song of Ice and Fire units. What people are doing is they're taking them, they're not just chopping them off the bases, they're eliminating the bases altogether. And the idea is they take the feet, they'll stick some magnets in there, and then there'll be magnets embedded into just the movement tray, right? There is no individual little slots in the movement tray anymore. There's no little circles in there. There's just the magnetized guys. And well, obviously when they flee or die, whatever, they get taken off, and then when they come back, they get put back on there again. Now, oh boy, now you're starting to deal with a few different things, polarity issues. That is like the biggest concern. Now, I've seen them with cavalry, and I've seen them with the infantry units too. But I think what I might do on some future ones here is maybe just make a whole diorama out of them, and then do some wound counters. Because to me, as soon as you effectively take away the ranks, it's going to be hard to see what's going on with the unit itself. You might think it's down to 7 when really it has 6 guys left, or only 5, because you don't have the rows anymore. Your brain just instinctively goes to where the rows are. And it says, oh, okay, in row 3, there's only 1 guy left. So that means there's this many guys left in the unit, period. As soon as you do, and it looks great, don't get me wrong, it looks really good. However, I can see it being a nightmare to figure out. You have to, every single time you look at that unit, you got to just visually count it. 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. I'm thinking if you just go Kings of War style, and you just say, okay, fine, we're going Kings of War style. This is a little bit of the, whatchamacallit, in the sepia, a little bit of the burnt cyan into the sepia. That's a little yellow in there. What the heck? There we go. See, it gives it a little bit of a opaque look, and we'll even let some of that. This is why I'm not worried about it creeping into the blue, because, oh, well, that could be a reminder to do the reflected yellow. So that is something that I'm thinking about for a future unit, and I'm thinking actually with the Targaryens with their horses first, because it's only 4 of them, and the bases are bigger, right? So what I'm thinking of doing is, if any of you guys don't mind, perhaps 1 unit normal way, bases kind of the standard way, 4 separate bases, and they're 2 rows of 2, whatever. But then try that same unit again. Wow, we're gonna have to reflect this on this hammer, aren't we? Do that same unit again, because it's basically a starter set unit, but then try and do it more Kings of War style, where it's just a complete base. Because it's 4 guys, you put a dice next to it. You got even the 12-man, the infantry trays. You put a 12-sider. Everybody's got 12-siders. They have to. I mean, it's just, I don't. Well, I have 10-siders for Wild West Exodus, so I don't have a lot of 12-siders, and I still have 12-siders because I don't play D&D or role-playing games. I still have 12-siders. So I think that would be adequate. I'll just put a dice next to it. What does it matter? And especially in this game, there's already 15 counters sitting on that unit anyways, between panic tokens and weakened tokens and this and that tokens and what other kind of tokens there are. What's it going to hurt to have 1 more? like just a dice on it. And in fact, sometimes you're still putting a dice on there because there's other minuses to morale tests or whatever. So to me, actually, it would make it easier to carry the thing around because now I wouldn't have to magnetize. I wouldn't have to do this. Where is it? Here we go. I wouldn't have to do this. All right, and now let's see which one is okay. This is 12. Let's get him in the right spot. Now, again, you can see here it's really easy to tell from a distance who's who, how many guys. Okay, there's one guy left. But, as soon like this, okay, yeah, he goes there, but this other one, he goes here. Okay, but some of them he'll just bounce off because of polarity issues. Yeah, like here, look at this. He's bouncing off of this one. I can't get him to stick to that one. He's going to stick to this one, but not to that one. Literally, the tray is getting pushed away as I pushed him down. Can you imagine? You do all this stuff. You got magnets embedded in the foot of a horse, and the next thing you know, you got polarity issues. That's sad face. And that was the whole reason why I kind of was digging the Kings of War game in the first place, is we get lots of yellow down here. So I realize we're delving into army painting territory, but just as because there's a few pledges that fall under that. There's the basing pledge, right? There's the army painter pledge. So there's a few pledge levels that are affected by anything that involves basing, and that's kind of a big deal in the basing realm. So I just thought I'd throw that out there. It seems to be more and more of a thing with Song of Ice and Fire. They look fantastic, right? It really does look like a true vignette or a diorama when you do that. That's fantastic. However, again, potential drawbacks as we get a little bit of our burnt sienna here just for gloves and the handles here of these of the maces and everything. Ooh, where else? Oh, over here too. Glove, hammers, mace, whatever the heck these things are. Now, I really am curious to see what kind of fun stuff, because now we can do multiple levels, right? Let's say you got an archer unit. You could have the archers in the back row really be genuinely taller, as opposed to what I had to do before. If I wanted to have an archer unit or something like that and make them look like they were tall, I'd have to just kind of make the bases taller. Well, and the back of bases being taller is like, how do these guys conveniently stand like on these little boxes of rock? And it just looked forced. It didn't really look. I mean, it looked okay, but in comparison to the more straight up diorama style basing, no comparison between the two. Now, what really got me thinking about it was this particular unit, which was a colossal pain. Even with the simplest way, this unit was painful. Now that's rare. It's rare in this game, but I also wanted you to see how that yellow is a little bit. It's more towards the lemon yellow. It's not super warm. We also have to see all these folds here. They have to be darker, but they can't be super dark. And I thought again another. I don't know. I thought it'd be just kind of an interesting little. Let's get a touch of red into this. There. Some more of our sepia here. I just thought it'd be an interesting thing in color temperature of yellow. I mean, especially all you guys that have to paint Imperial Fists or anything that is yellow. There's just so much freaking yellow on these guys. I thought it could practically be. Well, what was the color? Yellow Alert, right? The old painting pyramid. Oh, actually, maybe check that out. If you haven't checked it out, I mean, basically anybody who pledged at $5 or above has that video. Maybe check that out and compare it to this. And what we're doing here, yellow just seems to be one of those colors that people have all kinds of problems with. And for me, it's just another color. It's not any big deal. I don't care if they're Imperial Fists or whatever else is yellow. Doesn't matter to me. It's just yellow, just another color. Now you can see we're letting a lot of that blue get in here, so you're going to see a lot of the greenish tint, I guess you would say, to some of the yellow. Why? Because they're walking around on this very, very dark blue, almost black blue marble floor. So it makes sense that at least the parts of the cloaks that are facing towards that really dark blue should have some sort of an influence from all that dark blue. Now let's start to think about some of our yellow reflections in here. Already was starting to forget about that. Not worried about the stuff here on the base because I can basically paint that again. So not an issue here. I can also, again, here's that off-white. That's what really gives us the opacity. And if I just look at a touch of it in there, boy, makes such a big difference already. Okay. I don't want this to get too warm too fast, and I'm going to go back and forth between these here. Gives the paint, see, it's still wet. This is another reason why I'm doing 2 of these, because it gives that paint just enough time to not be super wet, but enough time for me to work my way back around and maybe still be able to wet blend on multiple figures. I try to jam in basically multiple lessons in on the same figure. This is why you don't see how to paint the left toe of a Space Marine, Part 3. That's why it's all part of one tutorial, because there's actually several things going on in just one of them. Let's get this part over here. Right here on this, whatever you would call that. And again, none of this is even the final whatever. And this might be about the last I'm going to do with the yellow before I get into some of the metals too. Look at that. Gotta think reflections there, because its whole elbow is sitting right on top of this big block of yellow right here. Back to our yellow. Oh, okay. I see that the cloak goes all the way over here, so there's really going to be so much, man, a lot of reflected yellow here. Actually, yellow and red really are, as far as, say, clothing that you have to reflect onto armor, it really is nice to have one of those 2 colors to reflect. Green, not so bad, but as you know, that's a color that we use pretty often in our metals, so it doesn't quite stand out as much as the yellow or the red. But I'm hoping that if I do enough of these tutorials that sort of sneak yellow in here, that yellow is just not an issue for you anymore. Just like, yeah, whatever, it's yellow, who cares? Now, having the creature caster colors, which tend to cover even the yellows really well, that doesn't hurt. But for the most part, what are we using? Oh, look, more yellow reflections there. For the most part, what we're actually using is the Reaper stuff. Tiny little touch right now of the Pro Acryl, that sort of off-white yellow. There we are. Again, this is just another craft brush. I think this one's a 6. Yeah, that one's a 6, as opposed to, say, the typical green handle craft brushes, which are 8s. Oh, I almost forgot. Look at this. It's driving me nuts. Even I keep forgetting. Got to reflect that yellow here. Always have to keep reflecting it. Let's go some more here. I'm gonna go throw some more of the clear yellow out here. Let's see if we can do another layer here, or we just have to maybe let a lot of this dried. Oh my goodness, I forgot more yellow here. Yep, that's telling you, it's such an easy thing to do. You just kind of have one of those brain freezes or whatever, and you just kind of forget about it. Now, sort of in the final layers, that's where you're going to see some of the off-white yellow work its way into here, and then give us that sort of final highlight layer on our yellows. I thought about maybe, well, if I had to do 2 units of this, I would do what I did with the Baratheons, and I'd do one with the typical yellow and another one with the black. That was very fun. The other reason why I wanted to do these guys is because I don't know if you saw in the freehand, there's a whole lot of freaking undulations here. And I thought if I piggyback this off of the Doe Amroth series, that might be handy too. Because there, I was really trying to focus on, okay, this area has a whole bunch of undulations on it. You know what? Let's just avoid this area here. Let's see if we can do something else in another area with less undulations. These, I can't quite do that. It kind of has to be done in a certain way. So, because I've got to match other things, which means we do it the hard way now. We have to deal with the undulations on these. Okay, where is, again, I'm just going to keep constantly mashing into this. I'm going to just move this here real quick because otherwise that's going to keep happening. Hopefully that ½ inch or so makes a big difference. Now look at the difference that makes because that was a little bit drier than the last time I tried to paint on it. But yet the translucency or semi-translucency of that clear yellow, boy, it helps. Really helpful. Look at that. Okay, we'll just work on this last cloak here. I don't think we'll... Yeah, I think we'll stop here. We don't get this to be too light because we want to bring up our metals. And that we want to also play with some of our faded ultramarine in there, some of our faded plum, because it's that darker metal. It's not necessary. It's shiny, but it's not the, say, the Lannister halberd shiny, or it's the sky earth. It's just sort of basically a shiny blackened steel. If there is such a thing, that's what we've made, is a shiny blackened steel. And let's get a little bit of our, again, the yellow reflected here and here, over here. Let's remember that over here too. Okay. As you can see, it doesn't take very long. And as I say all the time in the army painting series, you know what? Even if you showed up to just a test game or something, right? With even this much, there's probably a whole bunch of people in the room that say, wow, that's a fantastic painted army there. And what did we spend? 20 minutes. That's it. That's all we've been doing. So it is possible, and not a lot of time to at least get off to a nice start, get things off to a good start. Now, oh, look at this. Look at this. I almost forgot reflected yellow here. And now, because I think I've got all of the reflected yellow in place, then it's a little bit easier for me now to go into the rest of the metals and do basically the same process to them. Some of this mid-tone stuff and semi-highlights. Okay. Let's get the top of the head crest here. There's a lot of, geez, even in this head crest, there's a lot of undulations. Bunch of like ribbons and stuff. There's so many freaking flowy thing on these guys. It's nice because it does make them look dramatic, but it does create other issues in other areas. And we'll call it there for our yellow. So next up, as we get a little bit of reflected yellow over here. So next up, I'm going to work into the metals here and start to bring things up to a middle tone all along here. And on the hammers too. We'll get that going. We're going to do that next. Let's dive into some of those midtones here real quick. And that means blue liner. A touch of that's our mint green over there. It's going to give us a little bit of a gray. We're also going to keep that faded ultramarine over there on the side. And the hammers are a little bit complicated because there's a lot of different facets to them. They are very heavily faceted, so we have to end up really choosing that whole kind of light. Do we lighten this facet here, or do we lighten this one more? And even this interior part, it has the facets, plus it also has some additional little, oh gosh, I don't even know what you would call those. There's a lot of complexity in these hammers. I guess that's the easiest way to put it. There's a lot of things going. You got spikes off of the end of these things. I suppose it would have been easier if they were just some kind of cylindrical shape, as opposed to also being an octagon, or right, 1, 2, 3, 4, yeah, octagon shape. Most of these are octagon shaped. With the other units, especially the Wardens, a huge portion of them just did have circular or cylindrical hammers, I guess, if you want to say it that way. Okay, just gonna, yeah, there's a little less to do on this one because there's just so much of the yellow reflected light on things. Oh my goodness. Yeah. You can see we're really emphasizing the mid-tone aspect of this right now. Now this one, just by virtue of the way he's holding the hammers, I think that maybe perhaps makes it a touch easier as far as figuring out where the angles of the light are coming from. I think this guy a little easier. There are there's the 4 different poses, and you've also got the banner bearer. So those first 2, those were basically the color reference ones, and then I also wanted to do these so you could see, well, how do you take that color scheme and then transfer it to essentially a whole nother figure. Yes, it's from the same unit, and the sculpt is similar, but certainly different enough that I know in some cases I've seen it. Blood Bowl teams, I know I've experienced it on those, where you go, okay, well, this guy, remember, I think it happened with the Lizard Man team. Well, okay, yeah, the Sauruses are sculpted just a little bit different than the Skinks. So what are we doing here? What do we have to... I'm going to get a touch of a little bit of medium blue there. Like this helmet sculpted very differently from the other. It has this, the visor is totally different. It's going to call for lights to hit in a different place. Stuff on the shoulders are different. Even the way this is constructed is different. The only thing that's really similar at all is just happens to be a touch of the sort of scale armor here. That's about the only thing that's that much similar between all, well, technically I think 5 different sculpts. And, well, we only have ourselves to blame because we all want variety in our units, right? We don't want to have 10, 12, 20, whatever of the same exact sculpt in every unit. well, if you want it to be really different aside from just, oh, okay, one guy's arm is raised and another guy's arm is at his side, or one guy's yelling and one guy is not, that now you're going to have to start to deal with, oh my goodness, now I've got to, his hammer is so different from this other guy's hammer, or the way his armor is sculpted is so different from the other guy's armor, so what do I actually do there? Let's do that here too. We also have to start thinking about these linear stuff, and here I'm going to go with the light that goes all the way to that part of the visor and then this way. Now this has the raised arm here. Getting pretty much makes this a little bit easier to anticipate and figure out what's supposed to happen with that. With this glove here even too. A little less decisions to make. These would be inevitably lighter down here, darker up there, because, well, that should sort of be in shadow if it's being held almost perpendicular to, perpendicular to the ground. Again, a touch lighter here, like you do. And I think you can start to see some of the shape develops more over here. I'm gonna go another round here with the mint green. And I think I'll maybe try to introduce some of the faded ultramarine to it. It's about that same level of brightness too. What we're adding in here. What's neat is the faded ultramarine. It's another way of helping this from ended up being too much of a sky blue, because if I keep going with the mint green, or even if I was to take the, say, the clear blue, the Reaper clear blue, do the same thing, I'm going to be wandering into that sort of sky blue territory. That little bit of purple just it sets it off just a bit. And it's something that I noticed right away from the concept art. And I looked at that and said, "Oh, that's kind of neat." I wasn't sure how intentional that was. I wasn't even sure if it was like a weird artifact of printing. Like maybe, who knows, the German language version of it had an entirely different feel to it. It wasn't quite so purple in it was the card art that I was looking at. But every time I saw them, there was that touch of purple in the metals. They were darker and they were more purple. And look at how dark this is compared to that white. It looks like it's barely even say a 5 on the value scale, of 1 being the lightest and 10 being the darkest. Heck, it might even be closer to it. Well, no, probably not a 6, but definitely no lighter than something like a 5. And yet, because we were able to establish those darks, well, guess what? Gives us a nice rich middle tone for our metals. Remember, all that middle tones do so much work. They just, man, they get no credit for anything. It's always the highlights and the shadows that take all that glory. Thinking about these facets being lighter, and then what's going to happen with those, I'm going to see what happens when I get into the purples there. Maybe have the difference in the facets, less of a value thing, one's lighter than another, and instead have one be just more purple than another. It's a difference. It may not be lighter or darker, but it still is there's a contrast of some type there. I guess that's where I'm going with that. Get a little bit of maybe reflected light in here and some there. Got another hit here with our mint greens. Obviously mixed in with the blue liner. That keeps it more towards that grayish blue and keeps it from getting too bright too fast. We need some back over here too. Oh, we need some. Don't want to forget the yellow on the other side of those metals there. That's going to be up against where his cloak is. Nope, that's supposed to be regular steel there too. And as always, I've got the lights turned way down. Doesn't look that way to you, but to me, lights are turned just massively far down. So this is just so, for me, incredibly dark. Okay. Let's start to work in some of our faded ultramarine and some of the plum, and it should work out. Yeah, it's the value is darn near this. Oh my gosh, it is almost exactly the same value. That's hilarious. Same value, different color, and while it's mint green in name only, just that is more of a greenish blue compared to this more purplish blue that we're throwing down now. So those are the kind of things that I just think if there's some way for you to learn about those without having to just, take 4 years art school. And I just throw that idea out there. Look, it's no darker or lighter. Just one's got a different tint. This one happens to be more purple. The other stuff more green. Again, that face looks a little bit different now, but it's only because one has purple on it and the other one just doesn't. We're also going to go back in with our blue liner to mix some of the darks. That's what I did on those other two at a certain stage. And I think now at this point I am going to... Where did you go? If you remember this from this was one of the recent army painting series. This is where we started to play around with these. This is the 000 here. We'll be comparing it to a couple of other things. A couple of different brushes right here. So this is a quadruple 0. This is a first a spotter, which is identified by that 111 number right there. So you can see it's not super long bristles there, right? Now this, whoops, wrong one. So it's a 0. It's a bigger brush, but that 222, I'm going to take this off. Oh, look at that liner brush. And it's Winsor Newton, right? But these are synthetics as opposed to sables. So the points on these, they're not extraordinarily different. I mean, obviously, probably a sharper point on the quad 0, but it's the length of the bristles, a big deal there too. Now here we have two 000s. Now this one over here, this is the Series 7 Winsor Newton, and this one is another sable. And I've been trying to experiment. What does this do well? And there's certain things it does well, and there's things it doesn't do so well. We're taking some of our maggot white now, mixing it with the faded ultramarine. This kind of thing, it'd be okay for painting this cloak, but painting the freehand on the cloak, not so hot. That giant 0 brush, that liner brush, would be better, ironically enough, for painting the freehand on these cloaks than the brush that I have in my hand right now. And you say, well, what's the deal with that? Why is that? It's because one is a spotter and one's a liner. That liner brush has the stiffer bristles there. This as a sable brush, it makes perfect sense that it's gonna flex, right? It's going to flex, and that means like here, it's tough to do these guys, these individual little pieces of the scale right here. It's tougher to do them with this. That even the quadruple zero would have an easier time doing this. Heck, even that zero might. And it's just something I found out. I knew it could sort of be that way because in the past I've tried to use other types of sables for freehand and other detail thing, and I just didn't like it, and I ended up going back to the liner brushes again. But it occurred to me that maybe you just needed to see these brushes in action to really know what the difference is, because everybody talks sable, 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 and they talk about how fine the bristles are, this, that, and the other. But there's certain comparisons that just get completely left out. And that is just how soft or hard the bristles. Also, you can see that we got paint down in the ferrule there on this one. That doesn't really happen. So what I'm going to do I have any? Yeah, I don't have enough time here. So I am going to, on my next, so I'm just working with this right now. And then what I'm going to do is take the next level up, or whatever you want to call it, in the lighter stuff here. I'm going to grab that liner brush, and I'll use that. And then you can sort of, it's also easier like in here, see, to get way down in there, because this flexes that when it hits the figure. See how it just kind of deformed right there? And it's deforming again. The liner brush, not going to do that. So I just clean this guy out here. Now, so we got a brand new liner brush here. So there might be some sizing that I've got to get out of this. And we'll see how this will do. Again, we're going to take some of our mint green here. We're going to lighten this up. We'll give it a little bit of a thin down too. And it acts very differently. You can see you're just not going to get that paint down in the ferrule quite the same way that you do on that smaller brush. You also are going to have a lot more paint in your brush, period, which means you don't have to go back to the palette as much and get more paint, which means you kind of paint a little bit faster, because I'm not sure if I'll have, on this whole figure, I may not have to go back to the palette, period, to get more paint. I might just be able to paint everything I need to on here just with what's on this brush. So it just occurred to me, I did it with the army painting series, and I don't think I've done it on some of the other ones. I'll do this on a dark sword, on the next dark sword figure too. Well, I think you're going to see it on a bunch of the newer videos. It also has to do with I finally got the darn brushes. I've been waiting and waiting and waiting for weeks, if not months, to get my hands on new brushes because of all the just lunacy that's going on. And once I finally got those, I thought, this could make potentially an interesting little tutorial here. So as you can see, we're still going here. Now, I might go and get some more paint here, but big difference from the little spotter brush. You also can't see the little thing I'm doing along the edges here? Spotter brushes, you can try that. It doesn't really, it's not quite so fantabulous with those. So we'll go back, we'll get some more paint for ourselves here. Again, thinking about these linear effects. Also have to remember, we will go back in with some of our blue liner. See, like this right here, these little lines that I'm doing, that is very difficult to do with the sables, and especially, sable spotter or whatever, because again, it's a flexible brush. It's meant to do that. That's what it's designed for. It's not like it's a flaw it's doing exactly what it's supposed to do. However, that is not necessarily what we want it to do. So that's something to consider when you're looking for brushes. And everybody always asks us, what's the difference between the sables and this? But nobody really asks about spotter versus liner brush. I almost never ever hear that. And it's a conversation that Kath and I have more and more these days because, well, now that she does the streaming, it's different maybe than doing the videos, but she still gets asked questions. And basically, a question she is asked, she says, what's with the the spotter or the liner or whatever? What's the difference with that? Because it just does not typically arise in casual miniature conversation. So what we'll do in our next segment, I think, is we're going to reintroduce some of the darker shades in the metal, especially in the form of our blue liner, for sure. And then we might even do some more lights on our yellow and maybe even introduce a touch of the faded plum in a few areas as well, especially on the hammers. Because I know that I did that on some of the other units too. Just it kind of made the hammers a little bit different. We also used, I think, just the blue liner and the maiden flesh, which created more of a neutral gray for the hammers too. So it gave us a couple of different colors on those hammers instead of just the same old, same old. Okay. There we go. And for me, I've used the liners for so many years. I'm kind of used to this, where I can see my hands are very far back away, or relatively far back away from the ferrule. Nice relaxed grips. I can use the sides of that. I can really get down. Yeah, it's a kind of a new brush right out of the thing, so there's always going to be the stray hair, the sizing, whatever issue that you got to deal with those new brushes a lot of the times. Okay, I think we'll go. Yep, so what we're going to do is we'll leave it here. You know what, in the last few minutes, what the heck, I'm just going to throw some of this sienna here on some of these leather straps, because now I really also need a comparison to the bluish grays of the armor. Is there anything else? Yeah, I'm looking for more of these straps and such. I think this one we already had a decent amount of the sienna in place. Actually, I see a sword hilt there. I don't think I've seen that on any of the other ones whatsoever. You know what? Okay. No. Yeah, we had our yellow here, but we also didn't have any of our blue there. That's better. I mean, reflected light is great, but you also have to have the regular coat. Ooh, speaking of which, my goodness, I already forgot that here. Remember, we wanted to reflect some of that on the hammer. This is another thing that your liner brush does so well, is just kind of sneak down here into this hard to reach area. Let's do it again here. I'm just gonna grab some of this yellow color here. And that'll be really hard to do with a spot. Look at that. See, it gets right down in there. Gives me some nice brush strokes. And it's more yellow here. So again, different brushes, different properties, just like different paint, different properties. We use the creature casters for especially the opacities, and then we use our Reaper clear and liners. It's sort of like what you would do, well, if you had the Pro Acrylic Transparent. Similar to that, except so like the Reaper clear paints, because they are just straight up pigment, like you can still just paint with those, whereas the transparent paints, they either have to be a wash or some kind of a glaze, or if you want it to be opaque, then you have to just mix something with them that is more opaque. Now, okay, so again, you can see what the impact is of something like a liner brush versus a spotter. Next up, we are going to take that blue liner and we're going to get ourselves some, reinvigorate the dark center metals, and then really go in and boom, get those brighter highlights and some of the purple. And we're going to do that next. Let's go in with that darker blue like we were talking about in the form of our blue liner. More of that. And there's pretty obvious places where that's going to go. You're going to want it here. Now we're not going to make that just a solid dark. We're also going to pop in some darks here. It's not black lining. There is actually a color to that. We're also going to get rid of some of the yellows that ended up hitting our marble. Let's also, can you see? Yeah, you can see that good. So again, here, some of that darker blue, and here we could also send it down, right? And we can almost make that into a little bit of a more targeted glaze as opposed to the original glaze, which was just poof, all over the place. This is a little bit more targeted here. We've got to now on his helmet start to think about, like this side here, we want this to be the darker half, right? On this side, we also have to get some of the, now this is what the spotter doesn't do. It's struggling like crazy to get those little dots in there because it's flexing and deforming, and that's the downside of your more smushy sable brushes. Whereas again, your synthetics, they're going to have that snap to them, a little bit of bounce. It's just, like I said, not that one is better than the other. One just has a different purpose from the other. Now also, I'm going to think about some darks here that, look at that, see, it also separates it's almost like it's doing some, it's not quite sky earth, it's more like sky shirt. I mean, or something like that. But we are making a demarcation between the two. I guess that's the important thing that's happening. Also here, you can see we're starting to get some dark underneath this part of the hammer. We can get that to add some little bit of darks to the handle of our hammer right there. And then we'll work in some more darks here. We got to work in some darks under this, some separation in between these areas, and then see, nice, look at that, a nice dark. It's sort of like a horizon line, but his arm is up over his head. That is why you're basically taking the horizon and you're setting it on its side. Whereas here, your horizon kind of ends up in the normal place because, well, that's in a horizontal spot. I hope that makes a little bit of sense. I know it can be a little weird sometimes when you're trying to explain that. I try not to be super technical about those type of things. I definitely try not to be. Sometimes it's unavoidable. Sometimes there's just nothing I can do about that. But now let's get some of our darker blue over here. And then what I'm going to maybe do is hit some of these little things like the belts and the straps and that sort of thing. The gloves. Because just like anything else, I need to know Okay, how light or dark are those really going to be? That will influence maybe what happens with some of the yellows. I'm just going to darken the ends of the hammers there. I will actually take my finger into just a little bit of blending on that as well. But I'm just getting a little bit of separation there. Let's get a dark under here, under this part of the visor, I would say. And I think when it comes to getting that final highlight type stuff onto these areas, I'll use the quad zero on that, and you get to see how that works, because I don't think I brought that one out. You'll certainly see it when it comes time for the freehand stuff, because that's actually what I used on those two sample figures that you saw. And they're right down there off on the left hand side for you. It's just a little convenient. Again, try to make those references easy for you to find, because I know I'm certainly using them. Otherwise, I'd have to just have the miniatures with me side by side. And well, yes, I've done that on Twitch streams, holding the figures side by side. That's not really ideal. I just kind of do that more out of necessity than anything else. Let's get this to be a little bit darker there too. And here, boom, we can see the difference that makes now. Separation, always looking for that kind of separation. And you got all these different sort of facets in the hammers. All right, I think we've gotten some of our darks there taken care of. And over here. And let's get our, yep, okay. So while we are thinking about it, let's take our, that's going to mix some of our faded plum in there with the burnt sienna. I don't want it to get too almost flesh tone warm, so I took a little bit of the blue liner to knock that down. And again, this is where this kind of has a, see, it works okay here because we're just working in a straight line. But as soon as I've got to work around these knuckles here, then it kind of deforms and it struggles a little bit, and then especially down in here to do stuff. It's hard to explain, and you'd almost just have to be using the brush yourself too, and get a real feel for the difference and how that deforms as opposed to the synthetics, which I use clearly I use the synthetics the vast majority of the time. It's not like I never use sables. I do, but a huge portion of the work tends to fall on those artificial hair brushes. Now I'll go back in here and bring out some more of these. And maybe I was thinking maybe this was the champion figure or the captain figure, whatever, because he's got a sword. But there's a couple other guys in the same pose, so it's usually the captain figure is very identifiable. Maybe it's because this unit always has an NCU in it, and I think essentially the only reason why people would have maybe just a regular old captain in a unit, well, I guess that's kind of a common thing, is just to save some points here and there, or a point here and there in your list cost. Let's make that cloak be, or that little tie on the cloak, have that just be not metal colored. Now I'm just going to take here some of the, again, that is the off-white. We'll plop this in here, and let's do another round of lights on the fingers here on the gloves. Again, this color is kept relatively simple. There's so much going on with the yellows, with the metals, and the freehand on the cloak. Now, if these were me, I'd try and maybe throw in some greens on the gloves, kind of make it be more of an aged leather sort of a thing. But then, as far as commission things go, now you are really cranking up a whole bunch of extra time on something that's essentially only going to be noticed by me. So that's just like, okay, really? Am I going to expend valuable time on something that almost can't be seen? When it's your own, well, then it becomes, I think, more a matter of pride. But now let's see, well, especially this hand here, but see, it works okay on those fingers, and then here it's much more difficult because the tip of that brush starts to flex and deform. I wouldn't even try and do that with this brush. The clasp here, any of these things, not even going to try it because I already know that will not end well. It's just going to be a struggle, and why should I struggle when I have another brush that is going to actually do that and do it just fine? So again, it's having a tough time with these knuckles. Ideally, I would just have like 50 Winsor Newton Series 7 brushes and not really care when one of them just gets completely annihilated because I'm doing all this with that Series 7. However, I don't even know. I don't even know if I could get that many. Let's just say I had enough money for 50 of them. I don't know if there's 50 of them out there. Well, certainly not in any one place to buy. I have to get them from about 4 different sources probably to be able to have that many of them coming this way. Now, I think there's some straps on the back. Yeah. Okay. I thought there was here. Thought there was some sneaky straps there that I didn't have. So one last round on the so-called leathers here. Yeah, another thing we could do is, if I can find something that has a lot of leather, try and do that cracked leather stuff or worn leather. And I think I might have actually saved a picture. Someone actually painted it. It was on a, what is, like a holster, I think it was. It must have been a holster. I think it was actually on a Sister of Battle, something like that. And they painted some of that cracked leather on there. And there's certainly enough of the fantasy figures that we do that have leather on them, so I think that could work too. Yeah, let's get some more of our highlights here on, again, on the fingers. So in the next segment, what we are going to do, especially as we'll try and finalize what's happening here on all the yellows. Well, obviously the yellow on the cloaks especially, and potentially also do the freehand on that if time allows. Do I have, yeah, this side here. And I see I do not have enough of the metals on this side. I've got all kinds of leather colors. I've got a lot of reflected yellows, but not a lot of my metal colors here. So I'm just going to, if you don't mind, sneak some of those into here. Yeah, I think that gets enough of the lightest colors in there. So what I'm going to do here, I'll take that quadruple zero. Let's see if we can't get some of whatever these, I don't know what these are for. They have these weird little things for hanging stuff. And I think someone actually answered what that was, maybe in a previous live session or something like that. I just don't remember. But again, look at this. You got a little preview here. Quadruple zero, and look at how that stays exactly where I need it to be. It's not flexing. It's not deforming. It just stays exactly in the shape I need it to be. However, this is also one of those that's got just so many brush strokes in it. Look at how much paint is already piled up into that ferrule. and any kind of paint piled up into that ferrule, going to have a negative impact. Definitely have a negative impact on the longevity of your brush. You'll find that out the hard way if you haven't already found that out. I'm sure some of you already have. All right, so I don't want to get too much into this. Is kind of working out ahead of what we were going to do, but it does give you a little bit of a hint as to what this one can do. So when you see it, not the next segment, but well, actually, no, you'll see it in the next segment where we're maybe doing some of that freehand stuff. Yeah, see, even here on these little dots, it's not deforming the way it did with the other brush. Just, it's fascinating. Now, there's our belt taken care of. So, you know what? Actually, I'm just going to do that right now. What the heck? I'm going to go back to the 000 here, and let's see if we can get some of our lighter colors here on the cloak, focusing especially on the clear yellow. But say this is what that sable brush does well. So I want it to actually deform as I make these lines. Makes these lines softer. It makes them fade. It means that I can start out with a bigger line that then gets smaller as it works its way down. See? Or the opposite way. See how that's bigger, and then as I press it, it sort of deforms easier. Now that doesn't really happen. It happens a little less readily with the synthetics. Again, I'm just doing the thing that the brush is designed to do, and you're going to get those results that you're looking for, or at least you hope you do. And again, using the clear yellow here because we want some of what's underneath to show through. That's a good way we can manage those yellows. Here, let's same thing right here. Some more of it here. Make sure we get a little bit of reflected light onto these guys. I almost forgot some of that over here. Let's get down into here. Now this is the area where it's not going to work quite so well. This is where the liner brush was a little bit easier to do. Even that, see, that it deformed there where I didn't really want it to. So I really this episode's really less about freehand and non-metallic. It really is more about yellows and comparing brush types. So if you see a different title in here instead of yellow and freehand or something like that, if you just see comparison of liner versus spotter and all that kind of stuff, or natural versus synthetic, don't be surprised. It might actually be a more accurate title. In fact, I like that idea of that title because I don't think there's a whole lot of videos that would qualify as that title. There should be. I think there should be. So like this again, it's right along that edge very nicely. Here it starts out thin and I smush it. See how I just smushed it and it flexed out like that? That's what if you're looking for, okay, what are you trying to get from a natural hair brush? That's the kind of thing you're looking to get from that sable, as opposed to something like those Cotmans. Price-wise, this is more, I think, than those Cotmans, but minimally more. It's not like one is $6 and the other is $4. It's now, of course, I got all these on, a discounted price on Dick Blick. Look at that. There's some more. Can't see it. Look, I can press it and then pull it away and it gets thinner. That's classic sable brush at work. Now here, this will be more difficult. This is almost where I'd rather have some kind of a liner brush. Now, I really liked the double zero liner brush instead of the zero liner brush, but guess what? Couldn't get any of them, and I've got like a constant vigil going on for certain brushes, and well, I think some people have experienced that with the Winsor Newton Series 7. So what's funny is I've never ever had to kind of wait on a Series 7, mostly because I don't need to keep buying those because I don't keep getting destroyed because I keep getting these other ones. So yeah, when there's a shortage on those, it's like, whatever, doesn't matter because I have these other brushes now here. What we just put in there was a little bit of that off-white Pro Acryl. It's gonna make them not just lighter, but make it more opaque. And look at that nice long down there again here. Boom. It's good for these nice soft strokes. And then here, look, we press it and see how it flexes out. It helps us to get that little area done so much faster. Here, let's get some of our yellow reflections blocked in here too. Now here again, so look at that. See how that brush flexes there and spreads out like I would want it to. Oh gee, we gotta get some yellow here too. Can't forget about that. Now in here again, where there's all this rough surface, ideally that is where you're working with something that is not a smushy brush like this. Every brush kind of has its thing that it does. And it has also the things that it doesn't do well. And eventually that's something that you'll be able to identify a whole lot easier yourself if you're just kind of new to this or new to the idea of these two and a half very different types of brushes, because there's sable versus not sable, and there is the liner versus spotter. Once again, we'll just get our last little hits of the lighter yellow. This means now that we'll be ready for the freehand stuff. I think that's going to be the last segment, because what we'll do here in the next one is we'll get the lighter colors on our metals, or the sort of those final highlights and some of the purples, right? And well, and also any reflections that we may have inadvertently forgot about during the course of this. All right. Last little bits of our lightest yellow here, and that's got us pretty well set. There's about some right up in here. There we go. You know what? Just for the heck of it, just to have it there, extra little bit of kind of just really reflected that yellow all the way out there, just for funsies, because why not? Why not? Speaking of more yellow reflections, right there and there, and even another one over there. Okay, we are good to go here. So next up, we're going to put our lightest highlights and purples on our metals. Let's work in some of these lightest highlights here into our metals. That's going to be important to give us that sort of sparkle that we need. And we've got a couple of things that'll work for that. We got the maggot white over here, and then we've also got the pro acryl. It's a titanium white. Now, what we'll do is we'll get some of the really bright highlights in it. This is that quad 0 here. And as you can see, look at that. See how that tip doesn't move? See how that just stays in one place? If I had used that other sable brush, as much as helpful as it can be for a lot of stuff, on these rougher surfaces, not going to be so helpful. And I don't mean rougher by missculpted or miscast or anything like that. I just mean it is not a linear shape like this. However, look at that big ball of white that's already on the ferrule. And I was trying not to have that happen. The other thing that's going to happen, though, is you'll have to buy the, well, depends on how much you're doing. If you're me, you'll have to buy them 3, 4, 5 at a time to be able to basically keep them in and work in order over a decent period of time. For you guys, what you do, maybe 1 or 2 will last you a really long time. And who knows, maybe you don't even need to get these because you don't even use your, say, your Series 7 that much to worry about wear and tear on it. For me, though, different story. I can basically annihilate a brush easily in a day because there's just so many figures that are being worked on. And we use, obviously, these in contact, or in conjunction with the bigger craft brushes. Now, okay, little dots, remember the little vent thing. So this line's so much easier to do. And then, look at this. Remember the other brush was just so bendy. Yet here, I just placed 6 dots with really very little trouble. It's fascinating. I'm even looking here where I got those rough. That's why I did the darker spots first, because I knew I was going to be able to kind of hide those with these lighter ones later on. So I do hope that this is interesting for you. It gives you some food for thought. With, because with shipping the way it is nowadays, too, if it's not these Cotmans here, there's other things that are similar. It's more, I'm just trying to arm you with the more general knowledge, just what a liner brush can do. So let's say you go into your local art store, whatever. Now you know what to look for. I can't tell you if other companies will designate their different brushes the same way. And heck, I really only learned just in the last 8 months or so that little bit of code, the 111 versus the 222. That second number really meant nothing to me. I was only worried about the first number. And there was that realization that got me thinking, well, gee, if I've been getting these for years and had no real clue what that second designation was until now, I bet you there's a bunch of other folks that are like me going, yeah, I'm not quite sure what the heck that second number means. It could mean anything. It can't hurt to have a little knowledge about that. Here we go. Look at this. Look at the difference that made. All those nice little striations in there. Let's get the top of that powder. See, look at that. That's broken up. It's not just one straight line. It is broken up a little bit. That is key. That is very key. Now, there's also going to be a fair amount of some cleanup in here too. I'm going to not just go in with this. Remember, we got the purples that we're going to put in there, the faded purple. I might even go back in with a mix of the little bit of the blue liner too. This is going to be another area where a nice broken up line there is going to, let's finish off that edge right here. Again, kind of relying on the Pro Acryl Titanium White to give me that a little bit of a boost here. And we'll go right again. See, it's almost a little bit like it's a sort of a sky earth, but not completely sky earth. Let's get, there we go. And we got the top edge to hit over here too. I see another. I see some more right over here that needs to be done. And as always, once I have all 12 to a certain degree of completion, and I sort of go back over each one and I look for, well, things like the reflected yellow that I missed on the one, or some of the, okay, there was some things on one, I think it was in the shadow areas or something like that, somewhere here. So it was really rough because I had gone on to something else or been distracted. Gee, that never happens to anybody while they're painting. And I went back in and just actually with some of the colors that I used on these guys and gave that a nice little, fixed that up a little bit. So see, look at that. Where's our brown, some of our yellow in there. So now each of these facets just looks a little bit more unique and individual as opposed to just, well, okay, we have some random lines there. We don't want just random lines. We want stuff there with a purpose. Always want it to have a purpose. Now, here it was tough to get some of those mold lines because I was not able to chop these off of the base. Well, I could have. If these were just going to be individual guys and not have to rank up as they do, that wouldn't have been a big deal. Look at this. Can't see that? I'm able to just right along that edge. The other brush can't do that. That other sail I could not do. I could, for whatever reason, I can do it with the Winsor Newton Series 7. It is stable enough like that. It can't, for whatever reason. Again, it also costs 2.5-ish times what that 000 sable cost, the Dick Blick version. But I think I'll get some more of those because I also tested them with the oil paints. So I think what I'll try and do from now on, obviously this won't really work for older videos where I don't have that one. But just if you see me referring to it in videos moving forward, it's a point that I want to have you be aware of, that I'm using that particular brush. I won't always think of it because I might be, again, thinking about other things, distracted about other things, whatever. Here we go. And I'm sure there's other brands that have these kind of synthetic things besides just the cottons. I know you got your rosemary brushes and all these other brushes that I see people talking about on Facebook all the time. But to me, they seem to really focus all on sable brushes, and for me, I want to have a decent stable of both types. I want to have the sables, and then I also want to have these artificial hair brushes because, as you can see, it's not just to have a cheap alternative. It was only just to have a cheap alternative. Well, then I would never even bother with the Series 7 and some of those other ones. And there's things that I would prefer to do with something besides this, even as small as this one is. It's a pretty small brush. Look, it lets me do all my nice little line things here. I've been getting a little bit of water into the paint there, enough to get it to flow easily. like nice little, again, edge right there, but it's incomplete. So it's just, we did this end and this end, but we left this end alone. What that kind of does, helps it give the, where it's dark here and light, and just kind of being backlit just ever so slightly here. Again, a couple of linear highlights on that. All right, let's start to play with some of these purples here. I haven't done that yet. Let's get some of this faded plum in here. Once again, the idea is to give us a little more zest in those mid-tones. And maybe even some of the reflections here. Let's see, I'm just doing some little cross hatches there, almost to make some scratches or chips in it. Again, just a little purple in there on that one face of the hammer. We'll do that again here. And you can see clearly two different colors there on the face of that hammer, without having to resort to, oh, look at this, forgot an area of these lighter highlights. Let's do that. Okay, we have this, and then we're gonna, let's get into that purple here and do a couple of like that. A couple touches right there. We won't want it to obviously just look like purple. We're trying to, like right here, and here's something slightly different than what's around it. I think this could also use a little, yeah, a bit of backlighting there. Ah, yes, let's get, let's do something here, shall we? And I also think on some of these, I'm gonna have to go back in with some of the, with some of that blue liner and reinforce a couple of lines. Who would have thought blue liner for reinforcing some lines? Now let's get a reflected light there. And so, oh my gosh, I turned it and then it was really hard for me to see. Bingo. Oh, look at that nice. It's a little bit of yellow there. That little line of the purple cuts right down into it. Where's my other guy here? I'll do that one, and then depending on what we've got, yeah, I think we have the time left to then go back in with some of our blue liner and do some more darks. But look at this. See, just a couple of quick little strokes there, and now on the opposite side of our, and it's all on this side of the scale mail. Reflected light there. Oh, let's get some down here. And I'm going to do something here on the sword. I'm just assuming that's what it is. It could be something else entirely. I don't really know. Now this hammer could certainly benefit from, so that I like this. Well, we've got the blue on that side and then the yellow on the other. So I will, right here on that face of the hammer, and this one too. So okay. Oh, look at that. There is absolutely nothing going on there. Let's put a little something here. And that was very, very watery. I'm looking right here to do a little touch purple right there. How's about a hint of it there? And again, it is not to punch him in the face with it. But now, see, even here, look at that. It didn't take a lot of work to establish all those different tones and such. However, we need, as I'm looking at this, we need a little bit of a, yeah, there's no ending point for this gauntlet piece here. That was just kind of floating in midair, not really anchored in any way. Now, here's my blue liner. Now try and do some. These aren't super dark. We're not looking to dark line. We're just trying to, and I hope this will become apparent when we get, there we go. Okay, that's a little bit dark, a little bit dark. We're gonna lighten this up. This is a little faded ultramarine to lighten that up, and I think that's more like it. Yeah, I think that's it. And we're also going to put some of that in the cup. But yeah, see that? Same thing here. It needed to be dark, but not the darkness of the blue liner dark. And I am going to, on the other side of these, get some of that darker blue, because we added the white in there and it really wasn't having quite the impact that was desired. So I took that to mean I had to go in the other direction and maybe go darker like you do. We'll do that again over here and here. Maybe down here too. Let's see that. I'm just gonna basically straighten out some of these lines here. Okay. What is happening right there? There's just, yeah, that's gotta get some yellow going. And I'll mix these two together. I'm gonna take a touch of that blue to tone that down. But we should have some cloth here, and then we should have more of our yellow reflection here. So, boy, I don't even know if you can see this. Good grief. I think you can see it now. And just a little touch of that right there. And now you can see here, well, watch what happens. Watch what happens when I try to press on this. See, it doesn't spread out the way the 000 the other brush did, the natural hair brush. It stayed in a line. See, it does. Look at this. As I press on it, the point never goes away. It stayed in that point, which is why this one is ideal for doing all the freehand stuff that we got to do, and why the other one is not ideal for the freehand. However, it was better for the general painting of this. So in some ways, geez, this is kind of like a liner brush. It's like a short liner brush. But that has as much to do with, I would say, the artificial nature of the bristles, the synthetic nature of those, rather than the length of the bristle. So see, as we look at this, we start to bring in a few. Look at that. That edge starts to come out a little bit. So we add a few crisp darks there. We'll do the same here. And you see how it's all focused up on that top edge there? Let's see, and a couple of nice separating brush strokes there. This still needs definition here. Yeah, look at that. Just something like that. Is that exactly what should be there? I really don't know. This stuff is just fantasy stuff after all. None of it's actually real, so liberties can be taken. I do wish more people would focus on that sometimes. Are we trying to get some realistic effects just in general? Yeah, because it makes it a little more believable. Believability is good. It does, when you look at them, something that is sort of a high fantasy sort of thing just has when it has a little edge of believability to it, I think it's really neat to have that. I think it's great, but don't want to also be held hostage by that. Look at this. We're going to add a couple of these broken little dots. You wouldn't believe what that does. That little bit of broken line. I used to always, that would have been a line. Every single one of these would have been a completely unbroken line back in the day. And it looked sort of like Sky Earth. It basically looked like the cartoon version of it. Was that wait, I think there was actually a cartoon about the representation of cartoon glass, and it was the three lines. Then everywhere you saw three lines, that was cartoon glass. And sometimes even the cartoon was all about the three lines of the cartoon glass. I'm gonna go back to my other one after I do. Here we go. See, those start to. I don't want to draw out each individual one because actually that's not quite how it would be done either. Let's say if it was just a 2D painting, I wouldn't be drawing out every single one of those. But centering in on a few, not a bad idea. Also thinking about right there, another one of those straight lines. There we go. All right. So what we're going to do next in our final step here, and again, nothing earth-shattering, we'll just do our freehand pattern here on our cloaks, and we'll do that with our quad 0, and then we'll be all set to go with our sentinels. Let's get to the final phase of this, and that would be our freehand. I realize this looks complicated. Believe me, it's not. It's 2 lines and a half circle and some dots. And it kind of has to be because we've been talking a lot about brushes and stuff. This right here, simple pattern, trying to get over all this junk, as in all of these undulations, that's a challenge. That's an understatement. A lot. But believe it or not, this pattern is ideal for this because it can be broken up. We cheated here. You can see there's no completion of that pattern right there. This one is, this one's not. There's a suggestion of a pattern there. These little do thingies right here, there's enough prominent elements in this that make you think like a lot more has happened here than actually has happened here. And it's something that I've been able to replicate across this whole entire army here. So this is just brown liner, very simple. Very simple here. If you're looking for, say, a pro acrylic equivalent, maybe the dark umber or brown black, something along those lines. But here we go. This is where the brush not deforming is going to be helpful. So we go like so, and you see the line maintains its integrity, doesn't change in its width very much at all. That's important. Now I'm going to have to really twirl this thing around here to get this at the proper angle, but also again, see that brush not deforming, really helpful there. Now this is where we've got to offset our design. It's way down here, now it's going to be all the way up here. Again, that line couldn't do that. I was literally using the side of the brush there. We got to do a second line here. Follows parallel to the first. Offset once again. Another offset. Then this one again, tricky because it's going to go down into the crease and then come back up, and then mark this off. Comes right back down over the top here. And then it gets super interesting because look at this. Oh my goodness. All right. I do think you can see it, but this is the key. Look at that. See how I can just, instead of like this, that other brush, the 000, this is the only way it works, is this way. However, you can see that bristles, they keep their shape just enough for me to do this. Just enough shape there, maintained. So important. Like you do. Now we will do this on the other one, and then we're going to do those interior shapes. Which is the best way to approach it? Now, being right-handed, and there's another thing too. So really, this cloak should stop here. If you're sculpting something that was, well, a little more on the real side, this bit that's out here shouldn't be here. That's basically a construct of the digital sculpting process, so we will have to integrate that here. Also see a little surface I wanted to fix up over there. This one is in, wow, okay, this one's going to be very interesting. We can pretty much only do this part of the pattern here. It's, okay, it's on screen. Comes down into here. While I see this here, I'm going to reinforce those fingers a bit. I see I'm going to have to do some more of the blue over there. This is going to be very interesting. We have a lot of things that have been stretched a little bit further than they should be. Good grief. Okay. That's where this brush is so helpful, because look at that. It keeps its shape. I've said it over and over again, but man. Huge. Look at that. It keeps that nice sharp point. It's almost as if it was like a sculpting tool that was made out of some kind of hard rubber or something, that it's not losing its shape. I cannot emphasize enough how important that is. Especially look at it as it goes all the way down into that, goes up and over. And because it doesn't splay out the way the other one did, it's so handy for keeping a nice continuous line. And right there, we've got to finish off the rest of our line here. And then after this, we've got to do they're actually diamonds filled with just some yellow to give it that effective. There. Okay. I'm going to say that's good. That's good there. This is where the faking things comes in. Get some paint going here. And because I've got a big open area here, that is where I'm going to put one of these shapes. because the eye just recognizes that. Once you establish that shape, the eye kind of starts to look for it in other parts of the freehand, which is why we're going to put one here, like so. There's one. I'm going to move over here. And I'm going to put another one. And it's going to follow that line. So I don't have to worry about it looking too distorted. Now, the next one, that's going to be also right over the top of, and then you can see we're going to end pretty much in a good spot here. Okay. You could try and measure those out if you wanted, or sort of draw them out in advance or whatever. Take a pencil, whatever makes you comfortable. For me, none of that stuff is really necessary. It's all just kind of extra. So I just, I'm better off basically eyeballing it. I also have the advantage of having done this pattern so many times that it's really just a matter of taking a set pattern that I know and just sticking it into a new area. We've got our triangles inside the semicircles, and now we're going to just give ourselves a little bit of a diamond shape here in a few key areas. And I'm not actually going to do the pattern right there. I'm just going to leave that knot hat because I'm going to say that's some other cloth, whatever. Not even going to bother with it right there. But I am going to get the wee little triangles over here. And that one falls right into a fold there. I also have some of these. Okay, good. You can tell I was worried that was off screen for whatever reason. Good to go. Another one in between these two. I am satisfied with that. However, I see some things that need to be fixed up over here. Like I said, don't be shy about maybe you see something and you say, you know what, I better just while I'm thinking about it, I better do that area because you'll be surprised at how easy it is to forget. All right. Well, here it goes. This is going to be our semicircle here, or a little bit of an arch. And then here's just going to be an impression of an arch. They're not really going to try and get that whole thing in there. While I've got this, I'm going to refine this edge a little bit. It's the details are pretty murky, I got to admit. This one's going to be interesting because it's got to come from a deep recess all the way out onto the apex of a fold. And this one's going to disappear here. And then it's going to bring it back over there. This one also going to disappear quite literally. Let's get some of our little diamond shapes in here. I also have to emphasize that the liner paints are really good for this because they're very dark, very heavily pigmented, and yet they're so thin. You can see, look at what I can do with those. That some of the pro acryls would be more, it would be difficult because they're just, the paint is physically thicker. The transparent's different story. However, if you wanted this particular dark brown, you would have to take either the transparent brown and the transparent black and mix those together to do something like this. All right, I think all the other stuff is set. We are now going to go back in here with our touches of yellow. I think you can see that. Okay. So instead of trying to draw a diamond shape, an outline of it, we just did the diamond shape and then we filled it in. That is basically something I learned the hard way, because in the past I would have tried to draw in that complete diamond shape, only to realize, why did I do that? I could have just drawn the box and then put a smaller box inside it. It's easier to do that. It is actually easier to just, after the fact, fill in that little box. But I am also going to, speaking of making adjustments, going to do a little cleanup on that right there. I was waiting for that to dry so that I can put in my little diamond shape right there. So it looks like it's an outline, but it's not. That's the great thing about it. It is not an outline. Okay, that completes. All right, we're good to go there. Also going to need a little more resolution here as well. Better. Now, okay, I think we're just about good to go here on our little yellow inside that box. And see, there was just a little, there's again another piece of it that went astray. We fix it up. Each one of these, it's still nice dark yellow in the crevices there. See, we've got another one over here to do. And I can fix up that line. Look, I can and reinforce some of these yellows here. Remember, I talked about doing that. I wasn't quite sure how much of it I'd be able to get to, but I think there's a few minutes here to play with that. Also, for whatever reason, I was starting to paint metal on that part of this sleeve, so let's make that be not metal. And let's have it be yellow. Let's fix up a touch of this tassel, head crest, whatever the heck it is. I do think that's supposed to be his cloak that goes over the top of that. I'm gonna get another touch of yellow there, and then back to some kind of something here that's bluish gray. Also use a hint of my purple in here for some reflected lights. And we'll go back into this, that's brown liner here. I see some more edges that need defining. Even here. What I might even do is take a touch of the white and yellow together and try and find some even perhaps brighter highlights on the cloak, on the upper surfaces, maybe some of the tassels towards the top. Okay. And another lighter edge there. So let's take some of our off-white yellow here and some of our actual clear yellow. A little more. A little more of that clear yellow. Just in the last few minutes here, just to see what we can do. Yeah, that's better. And this is ideal for that. Try and bring out some of these shapes in his tassels. And you can see how thick the Pro Acrylic paint is. That's also what makes it more opaque, though. I want to have, and again, you're going to see it. It starts right here. The brush keeps its shape all the way through. Again, two nice lines there. I see I forgot my little yellow shape right in there. Boom. No problem. I'm going to get some reflected light under the chin there. Maybe even some lighter blues here, because I think that's a chest plate. I'm just going to say it is. I'm going to say that's a chest plate there. Might not be, but that's what I'm going to make it. And with another touch of reflected light there, followed by a... Oh, geez, there's a whole lot of nothing going on here in terms of shapes. Let's make some. There's some shape now. Much better. And there too. Okay. One more line over here. Should take it for that. And that is we're just about there. I want to say thanks for everybody for supporting all the pledge levels, all the new folks that have pledged in just the last week or so. It's really helpful. The more insane things get, the more helpful it is. And it does give me the time to focus in on, well, something as seemingly obscure and unspoken about as just the different types of brushes. So I do hope this was useful for you. And I will catch you on the the next several episodes. So let's get our other one in here. And there we have it. So you've got all the while we're talking about brushes, we're doing freehand, we're doing non-metallic metal, we're doing yellows, all the things that can be tricky. And we just got those. They're all good to go now. So thanks again, everybody, and I'll catch you on the next workshop episode.